What's going on, everybody? This is week 2 of the infamous Butt in Breneman show. We're in 12 personnel today. It's the tight end takeover. Adam, I'm fired up because, we were hanging out this summer. We were talking this summer. And it's the anticipation going into the season. It's kind of like, I liken it to the climb up a roller coaster where it's like click, click, click. You could get that feeling in your stomach. And it was week 1 last week. We blinked once, and then it's week 2. We'll blink, and then it's we're coming down the home stretch. The season is rolling. That in mind, we have a unbelievable slate of games here in the Big Ten Conference with some out-of-conference opponents. I'm just going to preview this slate right here. Michigan State, Washington, Minnesota, North Carolina. You're on the call for Rutgers, Virginia Tech, Northwestern, Duke. As you said, the battle of the Ivy Leagues. Louisville, Indiana, sneaky good game, very good game. Virginia, Maryland, and then Syracuse, Purdue. So obviously you're calling Rutgers, Virginia Tech. So I know that one's going to be extra exciting for you. But when you hear those games, is there one or two that stands out to you that you're most excited to see?
It's an unreal slate of games. The unofficial ACC Big Ten Challenge this weekend. The exciting thing on these non-conference games to me is how a lot of these programs battle each other on the recruiting trail. They may not always play each other on Saturdays. Northwestern and Duke are recruiting the same players to come to their programs. High academic standards. A lot of these guys know each other. They recruit kind of the same caliber of academic and athletic prospect. Virginia Tech, Rutgers, as you mentioned, I'm on the call for. That's a huge game for Rutgers. It's a program-defining game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Greg Schiano, if you can start 3-0, go in next week against Michigan with a lot of momentum, a lot of excitement, and beat a team like Virginia Tech, it's a big game. And then Virginia Tech, that's a game you're supposed to win, right? You're playing Rutgers. So that's a big game. And again, the recruiting demographic for those two programs, they recruit the same areas. They're both recruiting the DMV. They're both recruiting Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. They're in this on the same recruits from the very beginning all the time. So there's a lot of excitement, and in these non-conference matchups, you still get the familiarity of the players and the coaches all kind of coming from the same areas and same geographic locations.
Yeah, it's also a point of pride too, right? Like there's your school-to-school rivals, but then there is conference-to-conference. Like you want to represent the conference, right? People have a certain perception of the Big Ten, of the ACC, of the SEC, and so on. And you got to win to maintain bragging rights. I really am interested in this Indiana-Louisville game because that's Jeff Brom leading Louisville, and they have one of their offense is off to a hot start, as we've come to know with Coach Brom. But on the flip side, Tom Allen's defense, and I had the chance to talk to him on the radio yesterday, and I was like, every coach says their goal is to play hard. And it's like, well, what does that mean? How do you define that? How do you measure that? Turn on Indiana's tape. Their defensive tape particularly. We saw it week 1 against Ohio State. We saw it last week against their in-state foe. They play really, really hard. So That's a high-flying offense, high-flying defense. Who's going to win? And just like you said with Rutgers, the chance to go 3-0, on the path to going 6-7, trying to get to a bowl game and get those practices to build your program. This is the same thing for Indiana, the fork in the road here of what that locker room will feel like if you can go 2-1. And you can look at it and say, man, our one loss, we played Ohio State really tough, and then you beat a good Louisville team versus 1-2, right? We're at that pivotal moment where it's a fork in the road in the season.
And I think too at Indiana, you mentioned Indiana, Taven Jackson, their quarterback, has looked really good. I think he's got a bright future in the Big Ten. I mean, he's explosive in the passing game. I saw some of the stuff they can create with his legs. They get him on the perimeter a lot, which is exciting. I think that offense with Taven Jackson has a chance to have a really good season.
And Coach said, they had played both guys to start the year, but he said Jackson's going to be the starter. They pulled him into the office. I mean, a very, very accurate game last week, like 85+% completion rate, if I'm not mistaken. It's maybe not exactly right for those in the comments. Please let me know what the exact guy. I'm going to be wrong on that one, but it was up there. Very good. That in mind, sometimes we can make a lot out of things that maybe aren't worth making a lot out of in the media space. And one of them here is the non-conference game. Like, is it really different? Why is it different? It's just another game, right? Like, what's your opinion on this in terms of these teams that don't play each other, don't see each other every year, taking each other on across the slate this weekend?
I think it adds almost an extra element of excitement and anticipation for the reasons you mentioned, Jake. The bragging rights that come with winning that game, being able to defend your conference, and especially with this current landscape of college football, everyone wants to defend their conference. The Big Ten is the premier conference of college football. Well, then the Big Ten's got to go beat the ACC in the unofficial Big Ten and ACC challenge. The other thing is getting to do something kind of new that you're not used to doing every single year. You know, that when you play at Michigan or you play at Penn State, the trips to Ohio State and Michigan State, everyone knows what to expect. But now on some of these non-conference games that you don't play every single year, maybe you do like, you know, a home and home series, but you're not playing them year in and year out. There's different logistics. There's travel changes. There's lack of familiarity from what hotel are we staying at? Where, you know, what's the routine and schedule going to be like? These college football programs are a well-oiled machine once conference play comes. You know that it is a machine day in and day out. You know where you're going. You know when you're leaving. You know when you're traveling. Some of these non-conference games are longer trips or traveling to different places, and you know, one change or one aspect in that well-oiled machine could be thrown off the tracks just a tad bit. So it also tests the discipline of some of these teams when you're playing big non-conference games.
Yeah, man, I think you're spot on. Like the familiarity within the conference. Like, you know, I obviously went to Michigan when we played Michigan State. You know, regardless of who the players were, it was like, okay, well, this is going to be a junkyard fight, man. Like, and then you play Ohio State, and it's like, wow, I know 20 million people are watching this, and there's going to be respect, and they have so much talent. You play Penn State, very similar thing. Defensive guys flying around. You knew what that atmosphere was like because we played there a couple times. Indiana, even, like, it's like when we'd go play Indiana, I knew that they were going to go hurry up. They were going to use multiple snap counts, and they were going to try to jump you, man. And it was like, okay, when you play these out-of-conference games that you don't see every year, all you have is like a data point from film. And I think about, you know, the Michigan State-Washington game, and I know they played last year, but it's like you look at Michael Penix and you look at those receivers. It's one thing to see them on tape. It's a whole different thing to feel that when they're running four verts. And you don't have enough data and familiarity to be necessarily extremely comfortable. So there's about in my opinion, about a half a quarter to a quarter where teams are really feeling each other out. And it places more importance, at least in my opinion, on the ability to start fast.
Yeah, and like you just said, the coordinators not knowing each other in a lot of these matchups is the big difference. You go play, again, Penn State, Michigan, or Indiana, Purdue. Those coordinators have all come from the same coaching trees. A lot of times they know each other. A lot of there's the assistants have been on each other's coaching staffs. Now it's a wild card, especially Jake, especially early in the season. You don't have that much game tape. A lot of these teams have not played great opponents, so they haven't been shown a ton on film. A lot of times their starters haven't played all four quarters. So there's a huge element to these games where you're kind of figuring out what each team's going to do. And you know darn well that Rutgers, Virginia Tech, that Greg Schiano and Kirk Soraka have been saving a couple plays in their back pocket for Virginia Tech. Northwestern's been saving things for Duke, and vice versa. That Maryland's had the Virginia game circled because of what it means to that geographic location of college football. So these are big games. I can't wait to kick this slate off. It's going to be fun.
It's a great point, man. I mean, especially with week 3, I always find cases to get excited. I mean, it's easy to get excited about football, but
you're excited for the FCS matchups, man. You're like, it's going to be a great game.
I know you are too. Maybe it's football. We wait all year for this. Yeah, exactly. But week 3 from a season-defining point. Say you're 500, you're 1-1. Okay, you have 2 data points. That third data point, like that's math. That's data sets. You need 1, 2, 3 to say, okay, here's the trend. So there's the fork in the road at this point. 1 data point, 2 data point. Who are we going to be? That's what matters this week. And you mentioned having the trick plays in the bag. That adds to that importance.
Yeah, and we talked last week about the jump between week 1 and 2. And I talked about this a bunch on my broadcast last Saturday. The best teams make a big jump week 1 to 2. But as you just kind of alluded to, you don't really know what that jump is until week 3. Because 1 week could be a fluke. You're like, okay, we didn't play great week 1. We did play great week 2, and now as a coach, you're sitting there, okay, which team are we, right? Are we the week 1 team, or are we I love the jump we made. I love it, but now we have to do it back-to-back weeks. And that's what you find out in week 3.
As a player, you should be asking yourself that question too, is who do I want to be? Now let me ask you this, Adam, because another thing that gets blown up in the game specifically that comes to mind this week is Ohio State versus Western Kentucky, understanding what's waiting on the other side of that, which is Ohio State traveling to South Bend to play Notre Dame, a team that's rolling. Is it a thing? You know, I know you played in scenarios like this. Is that overblown to say teams are looking ahead, or is it worth even mentioning within the building?
Yeah, it's a great point. I do think it's a little bit overblown from, thinking that it really affects the play on Saturday. But that's because these top programs like Ryan Day running Ohio State, like Harbaugh running Michigan, like Franklin running Penn State, don't allow their programs or players to think ahead. I mean, you've been in the room.
Yeah.
At Penn State, Coach Franklin will not allow you to mention anything other than the current week's game. It's all 1-0. If he gets asked about it at a press conference, he won't answer it. I mean, it's like nothing matters other than this week and winning today's practice and winning this on Saturday this week. So I think that if teams did let it affect them, that it would play a difference. But I really don't think these high-level programs that have great culture, that have coaches and leaders, allow themselves to look ahead. Now, as you know, and I spent time in coaching, coaches do look ahead from a game plan and preparation standpoint. But that doesn't carry on to the field on Saturday, and that can't be relayed to your players. So coaches will sit there. Ohio State coaches, I promise you this week, or maybe at some point are watching Notre Dame film, right? They're looking at all that stuff, putting the plan together. What are we going to be against Notre Dame? But when it comes to players and the leaders of that team, they cannot afford to let their mind slip in and look ahead. And I really think if you play college football, you know how tough every game is. Doesn't matter who you play. If you go out there and turn the football over, you'll lose the game. If you go out there and don't tackle well, if you can't run the football, you will lose. It doesn't matter who you play. So I think it's important, but I really think for the well-disciplined, well-coached, leadership-oriented programs, it's not an issue.
Yeah, it's funny, man. I just something you just kind of expanded my mind towards something you talk about. Okay, so all the staff and the players are focused on this week, but then you say, well, why are these football coaching staffs and budgets so big? Because you have a whole almost intelligence group of people that are dedicated to scouting opponents throughout the year. Ohio State's already scouting Michigan. Michigan's already scouting Ohio State, right? Penn State's doing the same, And
it's because what people don't realize, or fans, is that when Ohio State comes in Sunday morning, to their coaches' meetings and players' meetings, there will be 30-page packets ready to go on Notre Dame, on everything they've done throughout the year, the plan, what their tendencies are. That doesn't get done Sunday morning. That gets done throughout the week by the analysts and the GAs.
Throughout the month, throughout the season, throughout the offseason.
I mean, really, in the offseason as coaches, at Arizona State, we spent each week, we would do a month of self-scout in the offseason after spring ball, and then you do a month where you're doing game planning for each opponent. So you're game planning from what you saw. So then, we're game planning from the previous year for each opponent. So Ohio State at some point in this offseason, I guarantee you, had a week of prep for Notre Dame and the game plan and saw what they did on offense and defense and put somewhat of a plan together. Not an in-depth game plan, but obviously just scouting them. And then when they go to next week prepare for Notre Dame, they're going to pull that back out and say, what did we see in the summertime? What have we seen in the last 3 weeks? And what plan do we want going forward? It's a constant preparation battle in college football.
I love it, man. It's football is so beautiful.
It's an art.
Watch the game. Here's the game right here in this little banner. But the game is really there's so many layers to it, and it's like chess where after 3 or 4 moves, there's an infinite amount of combinations, right? That's the way football goes, and that's why the preparation requires.
I'll tell you, we're talking about a lot of games right now. The one game I got circled for you, November 11th, in Beaver Stadium. That could be the game of the year in college football.
Well, a subtle thing that really matters here, Adam. That's our partner, Fox. Big noon kickoff. It's not a night game whiteout. That's going to be a noon kickoff. Because I don't think Michigan's beat you guys in a night game whiteout. I don't know the last time. We played in that game, the triple overtime, Christian Hackenberg back-to-back Hail Mary. It's been a while. But the afternoon games, it's different. Michigan has had success. So
yeah, man, a lot of ball to be played though. We can look ahead. We can look ahead.
I got it circled, and there will be a friendly wager between the Butt and Breneman show for that game.
Absolutely. You're going to look good in maize and blue, bro, on that Sunday. I'll make sure to send you some good gear. So,
hey, man, it's been a pleasure. Always is a pleasure. And can't wait for next week. We'll continue doing the Butt and Breneman show. It's been awesome, and appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you next week.